You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. In the wake of the latest school shooting, here are words this country is now sickened by. Thoughts and prayers, hugs, trauma, healing, grief counseling, closure, and National Rifle Association. Last year there were 18 school shootings in total around the world. This Florida tragedy is the 18th school shooting in the United States since January, and we're only halfway through February. The hypocrisy rises like a stench from, it must be said, Republicans in Congress and Republican Florida Governor Rick Scott as they express sympathy while doing absolutely nothing to control the proliferation of guns. Scott himself fought hard to make AR-15 semi-automatic rifles easily available in Florida, and that's the rifle the shooter used to kill 17 people and wound at least 14. On this issue and so many others, we have got to flip Congress this fall. There's other news in the world, of course, and I'll get to that shortly. My guest will bring us some perspective. One of the oldest and greatest works of world civilization is the Odyssey. Now, for the first time ever, Homer's epic poem has been translated into English by a woman who gives us the story as accessible, fresh, alive, and brilliant, with true to the original, unearthed, feminist insights. That's coming up along with Surrealism Corner and Fighting Words. But first we need to go inside the headlines. Deep inside the headlines lies the answer to why gun manufacturers have to continue to keep gun buyers in a state of alarm, threatened by immigrants, people of color, and conspiracy theories. 11 million guns were manufactured in America in 2016, up from 4 million a decade earlier. But gun ownership is concentrated among a small number of Americans these days, and the firearms industry has slumped because, brace yourself, Donald Trump was elected. See, without Obama in office or Hillary in his stead, fears of a gun crackdown have actually eased. No need to stockpile, so sales have declined. Remington Outdoor Company, a major manufacturer of guns that's been around for over 200 years, has announced it will file for bankruptcy protection. Trump's been busy fuming a lot lately, having to search around for a replacement for John Kelly, brazenly blocking the release of a Democratic congressional memo intended to counter GOP claims that the FBI inappropriately spied on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page in 2016, ticked off that the press and now the public have learned more than 100 people with only interim security clearance are currently serving in high-level White House positions. Further irritated that despite all GOP attempts to kill Obamacare, 11.8 million people signed up for the Affordable Care Act so far just this year. And about 6 of those people in every 10 live in states that voted for Trump, which does not bode well for his political future. And, of course, he's irate at having to lose one of his favorite speechwriters, David Sorensen, who resigned after news broke detailing accusations from an ex-wife about domestic violence. By the way, Sorensen is the son of one of the founders of the Community of Jesus, an upscale, Orleans, Massachusetts-based religious community with a controversial history. A 1991 book, still available, titled Churches That Abuse, included testimonies from former members about alleged emotional, spiritual, and physical abuse they experienced when in the Community of Jesus. Well, gosh, maybe Sorensen, when he ground out his cigarette on his wife's hand and ran over her foot with his car, was doing that just to save her soul. Meanwhile, the exodus from government continues, with the latest bold-faced name to resign being Rachel Brand, number 3 official at the Justice Department, who's getting out while the getting is still good. However, if we flash forward post-impeachment and Trump downfall, we'll still face a deeply wounded Justice Department and court system for decades. On the one hand, Trump and his hard-right Congress have been quietly, steadily appointing virulent conservatives and young ones to lifetime appointments all along the lower courts. For another, when the moderate current benches on those courts rule against these arch-conservatives, as did the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in tossing out the legislature's gerrymandered map, the conservatives then mount campaigns to impeach those judges. In Iowa, a running dispute over firearms being allowed in courthouses has prompted bills by Republican sponsors to make judges personally pay rent for courtrooms that are gun-free. In North Carolina, the Republican Party is working on sweeping changes to rein in state courts that have blocked laws passed by the legislature but were unconstitutional as ruled so, and so forth and so on. Political attempts to reshape or constrain state courts have risen sharply in the last 10 years. The threat to our independent justice system is severe and growing. Now for a quick spin around the world in 80 seconds. After 34 years, Sinn Féin, political wing of the banned Provisional Irish Republican Army, has a woman leader. Gerry Adams passed the baton to his deputy, Mary Lou MacDonald, who was quoted as saying, "The truth is, my friends, I won't fill Gerry's shoes, but the news is that I've brought my own." After more than a generation of struggle by women's rights activists, Sri Lanka's patriarchal political system has grudgingly cracked open a door to require now that 25% of local election candidates be female. Numerous women candidates in the recent elections reported considerable abuse, sometimes from within their own parties. The impact of the quota on the election results is still not clear, but Colombo, the capital city, was expected to get its first female mayor after electing Rosie Senanayake, current deputy head of the Prime Minister's office and a former winner of the Mrs. World pageant. Bermuda has forbidden same-sex marriage only 9 months after having legalized it. In 2016, Bermudans voted against marriage equality in a referendum, but it became legal after a ruling by the island's Supreme Court last May. Now the legislature has drafted a bill banning it again, but giving couples legal recognition as domestic partners, a watered-down version of human rights promptly denounced by the local Rainbow Alliance, which vows to keep fighting. And here's an eye-opener. In 1949, 75% of Chinese women were illiterate. Today, China has one of the lowest rates of female illiteracy in the world, and it has the highest percentage of self-made female billionaires. So why do Chinese women who are trying to grow a Me Too movement there keep getting arrested? I think we know the answer to that, don't we? We have to take a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but don't you go away, because coming right up is the Surrealism Corner.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back and ready to pop into the Surrealism Corner. Do you remember a few years ago when a California judge, Aaron Persky of Santa Clara County, sentenced a guy named Brock Turner, a Stanford University swimmer found guilty of sexual assault, to only 6 months in jail? The maximum for that 3 felony counts of sexual assault he received is a 14-year sentence. Well, there was outrage across the country, particularly among women who felt that this was the latest proof of a criminal justice system stacked against sexual violence victims. Now, almost 2 years later, the outrage is back. A grassroots effort to remove the judge for consistent, overly lenient sentencing in sexual assault cases has met resistance from people working to decrease high imprisonment rates in the United States. The irony here is that harsh sentencing and the resulting overpopulation in the prison system is visited on poor men and on men of color, not on white privileged men like Brock Turner. Interesting how the right wing basically ignores sexual violence and the left wing manages to excuse it. Interesting how sympathy for prison populations who are there for victimless crimes like marijuana possession gets used to excuse letting a Stanford athlete go free. And interesting how so-called leniency always starts with sacrificing women. In our intensely virtual reality world, we've now learned that the company Devumi, which sells social media followers to folks who are vain or feel insufficiently popular, is selling followers who are not real people. They're bizarre robot zombies emulating people. The company draws on 3.5 million automated accounts that are sold multiple times, selling some 200 million fake followers. Those fake followers also serve as phantom foot soldiers in political battles online, including supporters of Trump, reporters at the ultra-right bastion Breitbart, and as Russian fronts. I can't help but think of these lines from Hannah Arendt in her book The Origins of Totalitarianism. Quote, "The ideal subject for totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction and the distinction between true and false no longer exist." Close quote. A recent interesting article by New York Times reporters Amanda Taub and Max Fisher made me all the prouder to be a co-founder of the Women's Media Center. Talbot and Fisher write a news column on the international desk of the Times, examining global affairs through political and social science. They noted how underrepresented women are in news coverage by a ratio of 3-to-1, which reflects and deepens gender biases in who gets to be considered an authority and thus who gets quoted. They noted that they have the perfect opportunity to correct this bias, and when they are able to pull it off, as in a recent article on Afghanistan that quoted only women, the positive reaction from readers showed how wide the gender source gap remains and how gratifying it is to see it close, even briefly. The truth, they go on to write, is that the gender bias in printed articles is only the final step in the process of discrimination that begins long before reporters pick up the phone to begin. The problem is in the vast social machinery that equates expertise with maleness. For instance, Twitter, a valuable tool for finding research and researchers, is one where women face higher costs for using it in the form of sexual harassment and threats. A 2013 study found that political science papers by women are systematically cited less than men. Furthermore, women in academia are more likely to get stuck in less prestigious jobs or even to leave their fields entirely because of structural gender issues. So if Taub and Fisher go by seemingly objective criteria, like seniority or citation counts, the so-called best experts will overwhelmingly be male. They decided to correct for such imbalance by ignoring seniority and deciding for themselves whose work is worth quoting. They started by searching offline to find qualified, or often better qualified, women, and by scanning academic journals and asking around for names. They were surprised, I'm not, to find that it can rankle some men who feel skipped over unfairly, and some readers, some of whom inevitably ask, well, isn't that just more discrimination? This, they reply, is the challenge of systemic gender bias. Quote, no one person can fix it, even with the benefit of a platform as powerful as the New York Times. But conscious efforts to correct for its effects can at a glance look unfair because the biases that privilege men, while far more systemic, are often less visible. Close quote. Last November, over 200 women in national security signed an open letter warning that sexual assault, harassment, and environments that silence, demean, belittle, or neglect women were driving their female colleagues from the field. A 2015 analysis found that women were sharply underrepresented in think tank leadership and in senior government positions relating to foreign policy and national security. Still, the act of trying to close the gender gap in their work, argue Fisher and Taub, has great benefits. They and their readers are exposed to ideas and research otherwise obscured by systemic bias. And it's contagious. Colleagues say they will try it themselves. The most rewarding feedback comes from young professional women who are encouraged by seeing female experts cited. In fact, Rebecca Hamilton, an American University assistant law professor, tweeted in response to their recent article, quote, such a surreal experience to read a national security article so populated with the voices of female experts. Close quote. Indeed. Thank you, Amanda Taub and Max Fisher. And an excellent source for finding those experts online is SheSource at womensmediacenter.com. Sorry if this next item is a bit grim, but it is so bizarre and off the charts that there was simply no place else to put it except the Surrealism Corner. President of the Philippines, strongman Rodrigo Duterte, already infamous for his dirty tactics, incendiary language, and boastfulness about having repeatedly committed murder, yes, the same Duterte who's been praised by Trump, has now ordered his soldiers to shoot female communist guerrillas in the genitals. Tell the soldiers there's a new order. We will not kill you, we will just shoot you in the vagina. Close quote. He was expressing fury that some women prefer joining the New People's Army, a rebel insurgency force since 1969, to raising children. Now, I ask you, where in hell else but the Surrealism Corner am I going to put that story, or should I let it go unreported? In most rural areas of South Asia, in the subcontinent, women are unable to afford sanitary pads, so they still use cloth during their menstrual periods. Now, a prize-winning film, Padman, which was released all over the world on February 9th to rave reviews, has been banned in Pakistan. The censorship board refused to certify the film on grounds that it is against our tradition and culture. The film's director, R. Balki, was furious, asking, how does a film about the health concerns of women harm any culture in the world? His anger was shared by women in Pakistan, who were quick to call out the regressive decision and took to Twitter to rip it apart. Pakistan's film censorship board has been extra busy lately, banning local and regional films about women breaking free. But the interesting thing is that the films keep getting made. And do let's close on a lighter note. By systemic sexism, I really mean systemic. It looks as though there's a glass ceiling for dogs. Males win the Westminster Kennel Club dog show almost twice as often as females. Now, as you may well imagine, I'm not a big fan of dog shows, nor would I make this a priority feminist issue given the laundry list of work we have to do, but it is interesting that it's connected, surprise, to reproductive rights. Apparently, people who are into this sort of thing don't like to enter female dogs because they don't like to jeopardize their breeding program, since the dog's peak age for competition is 3 to 5 years old, which also happens to be the prime breeding age for females. Many handlers and owners also won't show a female during the heat cycle, which comes about every 6 months, because then the dogs tend to be, quote, moody, close quote. Well, who wouldn't be moody? Being clipped, leashed, and paraded in stadiums before large crowds, bright lights, and lots of noise? That would bring out the bitchiness in any sentient being. Humans are surreal. Time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be right back with the woman who broke the translation barrier with Homer, one of the greatest works of world civilization, the Odyssey. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. You know, in classical Greece, they used to crown their greatest athletes and leaders and heroes and poets with a crown made of laurel leaves in honor of, I think, Apollo. Well, we could say that this woman, my guest today, has broken the laurel leaf crown ceiling. Emily Wilson is a British classicist and a professor of classics at the University of Pennsylvania. She's a graduate of Balliol College, Oxford, in classical literature and philosophy, and undertook her master's in English Renaissance literature at Corpus Christi College, Oxford. She took her doctorate in classical and comparative literature at Yale. And in 2006, she was named a Fellow of the American Academy in Rome in Renaissance and Early Modern Scholarship. And she is the first woman to translate Homer's Odyssey into English. And with delight, I welcome her today. Dr. Wilson, Emily, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, I have to tell you, as an English major and as a poet, I grew up on the Lattimore translation of the Odyssey and the Fitzgerald, of course. And then as I grew older, I became very drawn to the 17th century metaphysical. So I found myself wandering around in Chapman and Cooper, and then later on Butler and Pope, which was mystifying to me. And I never liked the Fagles. And this is the first time I have ever read the Odyssey, with which I'm fairly familiar, when I read eager to find out what happens next. It is,
That's great.
It is an absolutely stunning translation. I was predisposed in one sense because, of course, it's historic. It's the first time a woman has translated this great work into English. But I lost even my feminism along the way in my delight and awe at the translation. I don't know where to start. Well, let's start with your being a woman. You wrote in a piece in The Guardian that you're not denying that you were a woman. You're not saying, oh, no, that had nothing to do with it. Nor are you deliberately bending over backward to that. You said it was an experience in intimate alienation, an interesting phrase. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. I mean, I absolutely think that gender is important in pretty much all the work we do as writers, translators, poets, whatever it is that you do. Your gender is going to affect that, and that applies to men as well as women. I think it was really early in the course of doing this project and doing the work of both rereading on this very, very close way that you have to as a translator, rereading the Greek original and then figuring out what to do with it. And then after I'd produced my translation, then going back and seeing what do the other English translations, which are all by men, what do they do with particular passages? And it's really only in that late process that I realized how totally different mine is in certain ways. And some of those ways really do have to do with gender.
Yes.
And so, for instance, I mean, the fact that in book 5, we had this sort of fascinating depiction of the goddess Calypso, and almost all the translations I've looked at depict Calypso in ways that are very, very negative and othering. And the Greek text doesn't do that. It doesn't present there's something wrong with this goddess's sexuality. We're going to present her as hysterical. And the Greek doesn't do that, and I don't do that, because I don't feel the impulse to do that. And pretty much every other translator did do that.
Yes. In fact, instead of this being overlaid, which I'm sure some sexist patriarchal types would accuse it of, being overlaid with feminism, this gets more to the original than any translation I've read. I mean, for one thing, you call a slave to make the reader aware these were slavery-built cultures. It's not euphemized by handmaiden or herder or goat herd. They are slaves, and when Odysseus orders them murdered, they don't die piteously. They die with their feet twitching in agony. I mean, there is a realism about this and a clarity that makes you feel you're actually reading the original, ironically, even though it is done by a 21st century woman.
Yes, the complexity of the narrative point of view in the original, I thought was being obscured in all kinds of ways by translators who wanted to simplify the story in order to heroize Odysseus in ways the original doesn't do. The original allows him to be this very complex protagonist and allows us to see the story from many different angles. So we do, as you say, we get to see the slaves are unambiguously slaves. We hear how exactly did, for instance, the swineherd get trafficked into slavery as a little boy. It's not the original is ambiguous. It's not. The translations are often ambiguous.
That's right.
So I just wanted to be clear about all of that, and to be clear both about all these different kinds of power hierarchies, such as slavery, and then also all the different complexities of the ways gender is depicted as well. As part of that whole being much more responsible about how is the original teasing out different layers of narrative, different people's stories.
Exactly. I mean, and there's also a clarity to this as well as a pace. I want to talk about the translation as well. I liken this as I found myself thinking of plain song. There's great humor here, there's great beauty, but there's realism. When people are being slaughtered, there's blood and muck and mud. There more than heroics. And there's an absolutely beautiful introduction and translator's note, which would make stunning books in themselves, in which you write, among other things, with wry humor. I hope to, here it is. Impressive displays of rhetoric and linguistic force are a good way to seem important and invite a particular kind of admiration, but they tend to silence dissent and discourage deeper modes of engagement. A consistently elevated style can make it harder for readers to keep track of what is at stake in the story. Indeed, my dear. And also why people should think that a 19th or 18th or 16th or 17th century translation into English is somehow closer to the Greek than a 20th or 21st century translation is a mystery to me. Of course, they're not.
Yes. Of course they're not. It's absurd. But I certainly feel that that's part of why have all the translations that people normally read before mine do versions of archaizing or foreignizing or extra bombast.
Yes.
And I think we should just need to remember that Homer is based on a folk tradition. And the syntax of the original is really quite clear and straightforward. But it's not actually, our notion of heroic poetry in English is based on this tradition since Pope of epic has to be the grand, sub-Miltonic sublime.
Yes.
And I don't think that's at all what the genre of archaic hexameter poetry is about. It's much more varied, much clearer, much more fluid verse form.
Yes, well, people forget also that, for that matter, much later, Dante got into trouble for writing in the Vulgate, in the language of ordinary people. So class figures into this. It's just, but there's a pomposity, a patriarchal pomposity to all of the previous translations, I must say, including some of the 20th century ones. That is,
I think actually most of the 20th century ones are time offenders in that. Yes.
Yes, I mean, there's all this "O sing, heavenly muse." And yours begins so marvelous. I mean, tell me about a complicated man. Well, my dear, I mean, you had me at hello. You know, but also it's in the style itself. Now, listeners, you have to indulge us here because what you have is a poet talking to a poetic translator, and herself, I would wager, a poet. Because normally, of course, the poem was written, or as it comes down to us, in dactylic hexameter, which is, for our listeners, stress ... times 6. In other words, an example would be, Emily Wilson is stunningly good on each page of this book. Now that's a dactylic hexameter line. Da 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 da. And you have done the Odyssey in iambic pentameter because it is in fact the organic style of English and the one in which the great English poets were most at home. And of course it rollicks along. I mean, it is fleet-footed. It is the same number of lines as the original, and it reads like a mystery novel. As I say, what would happen next? And the poetry is intact. Was that a difficult choice to make, or did that happen for you organically?
Well, it was very difficult just on the level of line by line, word by word, how am I going to solve the particular problem of a sentence? But it wasn't difficult for me to decide ahead of time that's the way I want to do it. I mean, I knew from the start that one of the things I most disliked about the most of the 20th century translations is that almost none of them have a meter. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that to translate such a regular metrical poem where the music of it, the orality of it, and the pacing of it are so central to the experience of the Greek, yes, into free verse, it felt like a serious betrayal. And so I wanted to create something which would both have the fast narrative pace of the original, and that would also have regular meter as well as naturalness. That it would have this combination of poetic artifice with the sense of speakability. Well, so I mean, all of that was part of what I was aiming for. I mean, obviously, how to achieve that on the level of particulars was extremely difficult.
Well, what I was trying to do. To this reader, you have achieved that. I mean, you sound like a young woman, and your photograph on the book jacket looks like a young woman. Have you been working at this since you were 2?
I mean, I guess I've cared about poetry since I was, I don't know, as old as I can remember reading. But I haven't been. I mean, I guess I've written before about how when I was 8 years old, I was in an elementary school production of the Odyssey, and I got to play the goddess Athena. And that's sort of my whole life story since then is partly just about trying to recapture that experience of being Athena. And I consistently wanted to be Athena. But no, I mean, I'm a classics professor. I've, been rereading the Odyssey for a long time. I think the fact that, in contrast to many classicists who sort of only care about the particular bits of ancient literature that they study, I also care a great deal about English literature. And I think you can sort of see or hear in the way that I wanted to be committed to the traditions of writing in Anglophone verse, the traditions of pentameter. Absolutely. I wanted to sort of bring out the ways that we can reread Shakespeare having read Shakespeare and Tennyson, and yes, that's going to be a different kind of translation because I'm informed by English pentameter verse.
Yes, and it shows, and it's a wonderful rhythm, of course. All right, I'm leaping around here, but I'm so excited I can't help myself. Let's talk about the women, because the women, of course, have always been. I mean, they mostly wring their hands and grieve in the Iliad, and they're better in the Odyssey, but they're ancillary to the main events as it's been translated, which are the boys killing and raping. And murdering and traveling. Unless they're a goddess like Athena, who after all was born from Zeus's forehead and had nothing to do with women and shows it. Athena's always been a problem for me. But nonetheless. No,
I know. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, she's a boy. Yeah. She's definitely what some feminists would call male identified.
I know. Yeah.
And she's, of course, Odysseus's matron goddess. But Penelope, when I was growing up and came to this, was always put forward as the ideal, passive, loyal, wife who, of course, unweaves the tapestry at night because she's promised her suitors in Odysseus's absence that she will marry when the tapestry is done, when the shroud for Laertes, his father, is done. And then she unweaves it at night, so it's never done. And you're the first to notice and bring out in the text, because it's there if you can pay attention to it, that everything Odysseus does is about doing, and everything Penelope does is about hiding or undoing.
It's undoing. It's always the work of undoing her own work. Yes.
Yes.
That's how hard she works on that. I think the poem allows us to see how deeply painful that is.
Yes.
To be a woman whose whole identity is about being abandoned and working to unwork.
Yes, and I'm sure that there will be some people who, rather foolishly will say, yes, but, she was as heroic in her own way and you're presenting her as a victim. Nonsense. His heroism is of a very distinct, patriarchal, warlike type, except that he's clever and witty as well. Hers is clever and witty without the war, but she is decidedly in a powerless role and doing the best, by God, with that she can. So you have presented, an ambivalent character who is very interesting. I always think if somebody has no capacity for ambivalence, we shouldn't trust them. Look at Trump. Talk to us about Penelope.
Yes, so, I certainly hear the people who think we have to present her as a heroic character whose heroism is parallel to his, and isn't it wonderful because they're both so smart, so it's an idealized heteronormative marriage. I know what they're saying, I know why they want that. I don't see that in the poem. I see the poem insisting on all the constraints that are put upon Penelope, how she's always appearing behind veils, and what she's constantly saying is, I'm marked by time, I'm marked by pain, I'm marked by having been constantly abandoned. And as we've already said, her work is all about undoing. She's put in a position where the only possibility for choice that she has is to be in one marriage or to be in a different marriage.
Yes.
And the only option is either to be in this same house. She presents herself as very much attached to the house that she's in, and what doesn't want is to have to leave the space. Because it's the only space she knows, because, of course, as an elite woman within society, she doesn't get to go anywhere. She only stays in her own room. The event of Penelope coming downstairs is a huge deal. Here she is making a great journey, and she's come downstairs.
Right.
So I think the poem is allowing us to see what it is to be very smart, very brave, very strong, and to have almost no choice whatsoever. And I think that, for instance, that great scene where Odysseus is still in disguise and he's sort of cruelly talking about Odysseus to her and teasing her about it, and she starts crying and her face is melting. And the poem seems to say her face is melting. It's not that her tears are like melting snow. She is disintegrating. So I want just to bring out all of the ways that Penelope is somehow destroyed by being in this position. That her whole nature is to be in this terribly trapped environment.
Yes. And of course, I
don't think it's unfeminist to say there's something horrible about what's happening to this woman.
My God, no.
Or to this female character.
No. Somehow victim has got very misused. If you complain at all, someone says, "Oh, you're playing the victim." And thus blames the victim. But on the other hand, if you perceive any agency at all in a situation where a woman is oppressed, somebody will say, you're denying her your victimhood. So one should not listen to either one and look at what is actually happening. And in this case, what is actually happening in the poem. And you've got to the truth in a way that makes me real. We used to say in the 1970s, when accused that we were putting on feminist glasses and seeing the world through a feminist lens, we would say, no, actually we're taking off the blinders, patriarchal blinders, and seeing the world for the first time. And that's the way I feel about this edition of the Odyssey. I'm encountering the poem for the first time.
That's certainly what I hope. It's just to be looking more clearly at what was there. I guess just one more thing about Penelope is that I've emphasized constraints and pain and disintegration, but then there's also, within the constraints that she has, she's an elite woman. And I really wanted to bring out that complexity as well, that we see her also scolding the slave Melantho, whom we're told she's raised like a daughter.
Yes.
And she tries to silence her. And then presumably Melantho is one of the 12 slave women who are then brutally hanged by Penelope's son.
Yes, yes.
And clearly Penelope is collusive with that insofar as she has any agency. You know, you talked about Athena as male identified, and insofar as Penelope has agency, it's through elite men.
That's right.
And
that was the only
route.
route.
She can choose to speak, and that's that.
That was the only route. I mean, and also you so interestingly bring out the shadow of which she may or may not have heard rumors of what had happened to Agamemnon when he returned home, and of course was murdered by Clytemnestra, his wife, and her then lover. I guess so you have brought together aspects of that time and these legends as they operated in folk culture and came to light as poetry in a way that I don't truly think. I'm not a Homeric scholar. I am simply a lover of the English language and a lover of these particular poems. I think this has never been done before, and I cannot be more praiseful of it. Dear listeners, if you have never read the Iliad, well, let's put the Iliad aside for a while. Blood and murder and a lot of death. Troy.
I'll get to that one day.
She'll get to it. And wait till she hang on. Exactly. Hang on until she does. But if you have never read the Odyssey, let this be your entry. Let this be your first book, because it is accessible. It is unputdownable. It is fun. It will literally make you laugh and cry and wonder what the hell happens next, even if you've seen Baudelaireized movies. If you have read the Odyssey, come to it afresh. If you are a feminist, read it for its profound and complex feminism. If you're not a feminist, read it anyway, because it is not a simplistic feminism. And read it for its poetry, because she has in fact translated this as a poem, not in the prose of most of the 20th century translations. It is a brilliant accomplishment, and I thank you for it, Emily Wilson. And I can't wait to read what you do next.
Thank you so much. That was so lovely.
And now it's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. You may have seen the news note that journalist Joshua Green, author of a book on Steve Bannon, watched the Golden Globes ceremony on TV with Bannon, hoping to come away with some interesting new quotes for the forthcoming paperback edition of his book. Well, he got them. As the men watched the award show, with women wearing black to express solidarity with the Me Too movement, and Oprah Winfrey winning sustained applause for her speech about Time's Up, Bannon apparently couldn't contain himself. Quote, "It's a Cromwell moment," he reportedly said. "It's even more powerful than populism. It's deeper, it's primal, it's elemental. The long black dresses and all that. This is the Puritans. It's anti-patriarchy. If you rolled out a guillotine, they'd chop off every set of balls in the room. You watch, the time has come. Women are going to take charge of society, and they couldn't juxtapose a better villain than Trump. He is the patriarch. This is a definitional moment in the culture. It'll never be the same going forward. The anti-patriarchy movement is going to undo 10,000 years of recorded history. Close quote. Later, watching the State of the Union speech with Bloomberg Views reporter Michael Lewis, Bannon went on another rave. Quote, "The top 7 stories today are all guys getting blown up, and these are not small guys. I think it's like the Tea Party, only bigger. It's not just Me Too. It's not just sexual harassment. It's an anti-patriarchy movement. Time's up on 10,000 years of recorded history. This is coming. This is real." Period. Close quote. Well, well, well. Now, first, we have to leave aside the Cromwell reference, which is pretentious and inaccurate whether he's referring to either Thomas or Oliver. Next, we must leave aside the Puritan and Pilgrim reference, which is a cliché always trotted out whenever women insist on being seen as more than inflatable sexual dolls, and which is also an inaccurate portrayal of the original Puritans and Pilgrim communities who were not anti-sex but were egalitarian, and which even gets the color of their dress wrong. Women wore gray, men wore black. In other words, we have to leave aside whatever pretends to be historical fact in Bannon's quotes and focus only on his opinions. If you do that, it's actually rather a perceptive quote. Of course, it's also necessary to leave aside Bannon's solipsistic egotism that assumes the goal of women is his and other men's testicles, which he clearly believes dangle at the center of the cosmos, but no woman does. The anxiety and preoccupation many men suffer regarding their genitalia is in fact a source of bewilderment among women and some pity. How awkward it must be to have your ovaries hanging outside your body. And sometimes, it must be confessed, it's the subject of considerable merriment and hilarity among women. But generally, women are not into real or symbolic castration the way that men are. I, for one, am encouraged by a new feminist movement among conservative Jews. These are women who are not circumcising their sons. This parallels an American trend since the 1970s against universal newborn circumcision. That, to me, rather barbaric rite was thought at one point to help reduce sexually transmitted infections and urinary tract infections, until some scientists pointed out that simple improved hygiene would solve that. After all, you could say the same thing about ears, and no one is suggesting amputating ears. Personally, I've always been a bit mystified by some feminists who campaign against FGM, female genital mutilation, yet circumcise their sons for religious reasons. Ah, the power of religion. But back to Steve Bannon. Let's not forget that he was an early Trump regime harbinger of guys into domestic violence. There's so much awful about the Trumpists, and about Bannon in particular, that fresh horrors cover up the old ones, and we forget. But as the New York Times reported, Bannon was charged in February 1996 with domestic violence, battery, and attempting to dissuade a victim from reporting a crime. The case was dropped when his then second wife, Mary Louise Picard, didn't show up in court. In court records, Picard later claimed that Bannon ordered her to leave town to avoid testifying. She said he told her that if I went to court, he and his attorney would make sure I would be the one who was guilty. Bannon's lawyer, she said, threatened her, telling her that if Bannon went to jail, she, quote, would have no money and no way to support the children, close quote. She said she complied, fleeing with the 2 children until, quote, Bannon's attorney phoned me and told me I could come back, close quote. The couple divorced shortly after that. Reportedly, Bannon was angry at Picard in the first place because she had enrolled their children in a kindergarten that also accepted Jewish children. It fits with his anti-Semitism and his racism. It all fits. I could easily write a book about why some men are so pathologically insecure about the possible loss of their manhood as to think it will be restored by committing violence against women. Then again, I've already written that book, The Demon Lover, so why repeat myself? Instead, I'll address the one thing in Bannon's terrified wail that is correct. What's happening with the uprising of women in this country is like the Tea Party, only bigger. It is bigger than populism. What's more, it's global. It's a truism known to students of history that at moments of accelerated change, it's adversaries who really comprehend the truth about each other. For example, during the Civil Rights Movement, we foot soldiers knew that in many ways it was easier to deal with the unmasked hostility of whites in the South than with the subtle enmity of white liberals in the North. You knew where you stood. It could also be said that Southern whites recognized that an empowered population of color threatened their white supremacy in lasting and important ways. Similarly, albeit through his own haze of penile obsession, woman-hater Bannon senses what's coming. It's been coming for a long, long time. The great cathedral of Chartres was built over centuries, with generations of stonemasons and artisans living, laboring, and dying on its scaffolds, each contributing one small part of the great work from 857 Common Era through the 19th century. Building a true movement that changes consciousness takes even more time. Building a movement from the smothered, suffocated voices of half the human species takes millennia. Building a movement through collecting and connecting similarities from the vast palette of differences and enforced separation among half the human species takes time. Only with the emergence of feminist historians willing to dig for unbiased truths and pay the consequences did we learn about early matrilineal and matriarchal societies and about the patriarchal overthrow and erasure of them, about the buried but consistent ensuing revolts in every culture on earth, the convent rebellions and the Beguines in medieval Europe, the women who fought back during the 3 Inquisitions, the Dahomean Amazons in Africa, the 12th century harem revolts in what is now Turkey, the 40 armies of 2,500 women each fighting for women's rights during the 1851 Taiping Rebellion in China, and much, much more. And always it was complicated, because we had to fight for our children, often first. And sometimes it was more complicated, because we had to fight for our men, often first. And then sometimes we had to fight those very men for ourselves. Sometimes the task has felt so overwhelming that women dared not acknowledge it in its entirety. But a few glimpsed it. Elizabeth Oakes Smith, 19th century feminist and suffragist, wrote, "Do we fully understand that we aim at nothing less than an entire subversion of the present order of society, a dissolution of the whole existing social compact?" So Steve Bannon is actually correct about something for the first time in his brutal, pathetic life. You watch. This is out to undo 10,000 years of patriarchal history. It will never be the same going forward. Women are going to take charge of society. This is coming. This is real. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And That's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.